Listen to this. The biggest threat to the system isn't a protest in the streets or some fiery political speech. It's not a tech revolution or a breaking news headline. The biggest threat is a person who can be alone and at peace, not needing anyone else to feel whole. And that scares people more than any movement or uprising, because someone like that can't be controlled with the fear of being left out. They don't buy things just to fit in. They don't change their opinions to get approval. They're not addicted to validation from strangers. Now, think about your own life. How many moments do you actually spend alone, really alone? No background noise, no distractions, no screen in your hand. When was the last time you sat down, took a deep breath, and just let yourself think? If that question makes you a little uneasy, it means we're already talking about something important. I learned this almost by accident. Years ago, I took a solo trip to a cabin way off the grid. No cell service, no internet. The first day, amazing. Freedom, silence. By the second day, I felt restless. By the third, I was reaching for a phone that wasn't there, craving any kind of noise to fill the emptiness. That's when it hit me. I wasn't addicted to technology. I was addicted to never being alone with my own thoughts. And I realized the world around me is designed to feed that addiction, keeping us constantly busy, connected, distracted. Because if we stop, if we go quiet, we start noticing things we're not supposed to notice. Today, I want to show you why solitude, the conscious choice to be alone, can be the most powerful tool you'll ever have for personal freedom, and why it's something the world around you quietly fears. In this conversation, we're going to explore I follow your advice, how loneliness got rebranded as a sign of failure, why silence is the perfect environment for true self-discovery, how the economy feeds on your insecurities, and what happens when you build something in private that no one can take away from you. If you've ever felt drained by the constant noise, tired of always having to be on, or suspicious of this collective rush to stay busy every second, stay with me. Because the thing you've been avoiding might just be the thing that finally sets you free. From the time we're kids, we're taught, sometimes directly, sometimes subtly, that being alone means something's wrong. Movies, TV shows, ads, social media, they all push the same idea. Happy people are always surrounded by others, always laughing, always booked and busy. If you spend a Saturday night at home by yourself, what do people say? You should get out more. Are you okay? You need to be more social. As if being comfortable in your own company is some kind of red flag. Marketing figured this out a long time ago. Loneliness, or even the fear of it, is a gold mine. If you believe being alone means you're incomplete, you'll do anything to avoid it. You'll chase parties, join groups, say yes to anything that keeps you plugged in. And along the way, you'll buy the clothes, the gadgets, the experiences that signal to the world that you belong. But here's what almost no one notices. Most of those connections are surface level. They exist more for appearances than for the soul. That's why so many people feel lonely in a crowded room, because it's not the number of people around you that matters. It's the quality of the relationship you have with yourself. The system knows this. It knows that if you're genuinely okay on your own, you won't spend money trying to fill emotional gaps. You won't drown yourself in debt to prove your worth. You won't live chasing approval like it's oxygen. And here's the irony. The people most afraid of being alone are often the same ones afraid to show their real selves to others. So they hide behind social masks, trying to fit into circles that don't truly accept them. It's like they're actors who never leave the stage. But what happens when someone finally steps off that stage? When they decide they don't need the audience to feel whole? That's when people get uncomfortable. Because despite what we've been taught, solitude isn't weakness, it's strength. Strength to live without constant validation. Strength to stop bending yourself just to fit in. And that strength doesn't appear out of nowhere. It begins the moment you let silence into your life, and that's exactly where we're headed next. Silence is a mirror, and like any mirror, it reflects things you don't always want to see. When you strip away every voice, every notification, every scrap of background noise, what's left is you, alone with your own thoughts. That's when most people start to squirm. Not because silence is bad, but because it's in that quiet that the truths we've been avoiding start to surface. I remember one morning when I decided to start the day without my phone, without music, without the TV humming in the background. I made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and just looked out at the empty street. At first, my mind was like a swarm of bees, loud, restless, bouncing in every direction. But after a while, the noise began to fade. My thoughts started to line up, and in that space, memories, insights, and even answers to unspoken questions began to appear. Silence is like turning down the static on a radio until you can hear one clear melody. And in that moment, you begin to truly know yourself. The problem is, we live in a culture that treats silence as wasted time. If you're quiet, it must mean you're not being productive. If you're alone, it's because you don't have anything better to do. That mindset traps us in a cycle where we're constantly busy, but rarely present. The man who learns to treat silence as an ally breaks that cycle. He discovers he doesn't have to run from himself. He can sit, breathe, and let his mind show him what actually matters. Here's the truth. Silence isn't empty. It's full of answers, clarity, and strength. But it only reveals those things to the ones who have the courage to stay in it long enough. And once you start to value that space, you see the world differently. You notice how carefully it's built to keep you distracted. And you can't help but ask, why is there so much urgency to keep me away from myself? The answer takes us straight to our next point. The entire economy built on profiting from your insecurity. There's an invisible engine that keeps the world running and store shelves full. Our insecurity. And I'm not just talking about how we look or how much money we make. I'm talking about that quiet, nagging feeling that if you're not in the right place, with the right people, living the right kind of life, you're falling behind. Marketers figured this out long before we did. They turned the fear of loneliness and the fear of being left out into fuel for the entire economy. If you believe being alone means something's wrong with you, you'll spend whatever it takes to avoid it. You'll buy the clothes to look interesting, take trips just to post online, sign up for subscriptions, events, and trends that have nothing to do with what you actually want. Here's the playbook. And while that cycle runs, you're not just consuming products, you're consuming images, stories, and comparisons that keep you hooked. But what happens when someone steps out of that loop? The man who's comfortable in solitude doesn't spend to feel good about himself. He doesn't rack up debt to seem important. He doesn't lose sleep trying to maintain appearances. He's a terrible customer for the insecurity economy. And that makes him dangerous to anyone profiting off your constant dissatisfaction. And here's the kicker. Once you break free from that economy, you start realizing how much you were paying in money, time, and energy to live a lifestyle that wasn't even yours. You see that peace of mind costs far less than you thought, and that it was never for sale in the first place. And that's just the beginning. Because once you step away from the noise and the rush, you make room for something far more powerful, building in the shadows, where no one can interfere with your progress. There's a kind of work that doesn't show up on Instagram, doesn't get likes, and doesn't spark instant applause. It's the work that happens when no one's watching. And because of that, it's the most powerful kind. While most people measure their progress by the amount of external approval they get, the man who values solitude measures it by what he's actually capable of doing. He doesn't need to broadcast every step. He knows not everything has to be announced, and that solid results are born from quiet, consistent effort. I went through a phase where I decided to learn something new, and I didn't tell a soul. I practiced every day, in silence, without posting about it, without bringing it up in conversation. 6 months later, when I finally revealed what I'd been working on, people asked, "When did you learn this? How did you get so good so fast?" The truth? It wasn't fast. It was built, brick by brick, in the time no one else could see. That's the advantage of building in the invisible. It gives you the freedom to make mistakes, to adjust, to start over without the weight of outside opinions. You create without the pressure to prove anything. And when the results finally show, they come with something money can't buy: consistency, skill, and confidence. But here's the key. Building in the invisible isn't about hiding out of fear. It's about choosing strategic isolation to strengthen your foundation. Just like a skyscraper needs deep support to stand tall, your life needs silent seasons to support whatever's coming next. While others are busy looking productive, he's being productive. While others chase recognition, he chases mastery. And there's another unexpected reward to this process. When you work in silence, you start to see who you really are, including the parts you've been avoiding. Which leads us straight into the next point, what Carl Jung called integrating the shadow. Carl Jung believed that we spend much of our lives running from the parts of ourselves we don't want to face. He called this hidden collection of fears, flaws, impulses, and repressed traits the shadow. And the more we ignore it, the more it leaks out in our reactions, our decisions, and the way we treat others. The man who values solitude does something most people consider unthinkable. He looks inward and faces that shadow head on. No filters, no distractions, no justifications. It's like going into the basement of your own house. At first, it's dark, dusty, and full of things you'd rather not touch. But over time, you start turning on lights, opening boxes, sorting through the clutter. And you realize that buried in the mess are important pieces of your story you'd forgotten about. Integrating the shadow doesn't mean erasing those parts of yourself. It means accepting them as part of who you are. Acknowledging your fears, your mistakes, your limits, and making conscious choices from that awareness. This kind of integration creates a freedom most people never experience. Because when you've made peace with every part of yourself, no one can weaponize them against you. Criticism doesn't shatter you. Judgment doesn't paralyze you. Other people's expectations don't chain you down. Jung called this process individuation, the path to becoming who you truly are, rather than who the world tells you to be. And it's not easy. It takes courage to sit in silence and listen to the parts of your mind you've tried to drown out. It takes honesty to admit that your true identity isn't just the polished version you show to the world. It's also the deeper, messier layers that make you whole. And here's why society resists people like this. When someone truly knows themselves, they're almost impossible to manipulate. They don't react out of impulse. They don't take the bait. They don't bend just to fit in. They move with intention, clarity, and integrity. And when you get to that point, you realize something even bigger. Real freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about needing far less than you were told you couldn't live without. Which brings us to the next step: what true freedom actually looks like. Most people think freedom means having more choices, more places to go, more things to buy, more people to meet. But real freedom is needing less. When you know how to live well in your own company, you realize you don't need constant entertainment to feel alive. You don't need other people's approval to feel worthy. You don't need an audience to feel like your life matters. The man who embraces solitude doesn't fill every minute with noise or distraction. He finds joy in simple things: a hot cup of coffee in the morning, a book read slowly, a walk at sunset. And contrary to what most believe, that's not isolation. That's emotional independence. That independence scares the system, because someone who can't be manipulated by the fear of being left out is hard to control. If he doesn't need the latest trend, he won't spend impulsively. If he doesn't need to prove anything, he won't go into debt to impress. If he doesn't crave constant visibility, he won't waste energy competing for attention. And here's the unexpected benefit: living this way makes life lighter. Fewer obligations that don't matter. Fewer expectations placed on you by others. Fewer distractions pulling you away from what's important. It's like carrying a heavy backpack for years, and then realizing you can just set it down and walk away. But make no mistake, this isn't about rejecting the world or avoiding people. It's about choosing, with intention, what and who gets access to your life. And when you do that, every relationship, every experience, every choice becomes far more valuable. That kind of clarity changes everything. Because when you stop relying on the outside world to feel complete, you understand something no one ever told you. What you build within yourself, no one can take away. And with that, we arrive at the final part of this conversation. What you build in silence, no one can take from you. It doesn't matter what crisis hits, what people think, or how unstable the world becomes. When you have inner peace, when you know your worth without needing anyone to confirm it, you become untouchable. Solitude isn't absence, it's presence. Presence with yourself, your true essence, without filters, without masks, without the performance to please. It's the space where you stop being a product shaped by your environment and start becoming the architect of your own life. And here's the surprising part. Once you reach this point, you realize the answer was never out there. It was always here, inside. You just needed enough quiet to hear it. The man who loves solitude isn't rejecting the world. He's simply not willing to trade his peace just to belong to it. That's why his connections are deeper, his decisions are clearer, and his life is more aligned with what truly matters. If this conversation sparked something in you, that feeling that there's another way to live, maybe it's time to take the next step. Look inward, face the quiet, start building something no one can buy, steal, or destroy. Because understanding the game is only the first move. Playing it in a way no one expects, that's where true freedom begins. So if you want to keep going down this path, watch the next video. The system wants you to think you're broken, but it's the opposite. It's the natural continuation of what we talked about today, and it might be the push you've been waiting for to start seeing the world differently. Solitude isn't the end, it's the beginning, and maybe it's exactly what the world needs right now.